Hey everyone. So today's video is actually not about what I'm probably going to spend 10 minutes talking about at the first of this video, and it wasn't because that's my intent, but I know myself probably a little too well. So let me tell you first, what are we going to talk about in this video, or the impetus for this video is, why do we not yet have a tilt cylinder for the Kubota BX? We have the Lift Plus cylinders and no tilt cylinder yet. There's a few reasons, and as part of one of those reasons has to do with the fact that this is a pin-on bucket and that is a skid steer quick connect. Can you see over there? But again, I'm already off topic. I pulled both tractors here because I happen to have a 23S and a 2380, and so they have the differences that are important for me to know about as I'm trying to design this. And I backed them up together and I was like, wait a second, we've got Hydros Plus Lift Plus here and a stock tractor there, so wouldn't it be a great time to also tell you or show you in real life? We've told you about this. You get about a foot of lift height. It could be 11 inches, it could be 12 inches, but it's about a foot. And that is one of the big reasons to buy Hydros Plus Lift Plus, on top of the fact that you also have about 36%. I say 35, the math is 36. I've seen the 36 is really what I typically get when I've tested it, but 35 is, I kind of just cheat back a little bit just in case anybody gets very specific about it. If it is 36, great, but if we fall off one, I'm still okay. So we'll say 35% lift capacity increase, a foot higher, but what are the trade-offs to that? Well, as you can see, it's about, the loader on this one goes about 1 centimeter, 2 centimeters closer to the tractor because we have additional lift height, right? Okay, it's about a foot, roughly. I didn't even actually measure it. I can just kind of eyeball it from here. You're about a foot higher, maybe a foot closer, and that's based on the geometry of the loader. Also, this angle, this dump angle is a little less. We could measure it, but does it matter? Are you going to not get it because this dump angle is, I don't even know how you measure it, 45 degrees, and this one is 49 degrees? Probably not. That's probably not going to be a factor that you add into your calculus as to whether or not you want to spend your hard-earned money on this. But here's what I would say. They're pretty close. If I put gravel in this, it's all falling out. Put gravel in this, it's all falling out. Put sticky clay in this, might have to shake it. Sticky clay in this, better chance, but still probably gonna have to shake it. So ultimately, I think it's basically the same. But if it's not the same, just lower it a little bit and you'll get that exact dump angle right back where you started. So last thing I want to talk about before I actually talk about the thing that we're supposed to be talking about is the difference in these buckets. See how this one looks a little fuller on the side? This one looks a little bit more narrow. I am certain that the reason for that is the fact that we have this quick skid steer quick attach here. Pushes things a little bit further forward, so we've got to keep everything back. Actually, I'm going to lower these down to where I can actually reach them. We'll talk about the actual video topic, and then we'll be done with this one. All right, this is a little better. I can reach everything here, but let's see, what's the best way to go? It's sunny outside, a lot of shadows trying to work with here. So, like we mentioned, this bucket is a little bit narrower, and I guess, let me make sure, this tractor may be just slightly forward. I think ultimately these leading edges are pretty much the same on the tractors. I thought I had them lined up pretty well, but they're pretty close, I would say. And maybe you get a little bit of extra leading edge here. Again, this is a little further forward because it's pinning to the skid steer quick attach, and then the bucket goes on top of it. This one goes directly to the bucket. So they have adjusted the bucket to kind of bring it back closer, still maybe just a little bit further out. Now, as far as bucket capacity, at a glance, I really thought that this one was less than this one, but because it's a little bit taller and just the geometry, I bet if we filled them both with water, they would be very similar in overall capacity. And I'm sure that's by design. I mean, the Kubota engineers, they came up and they said, hey, we want this quick attach that's on here on the 340 loader, which I don't have a sticker, but it's going to put this out. We'll have to change all of our specs. We'll have to have a separate owner's manual, blah, blah, blah. And then they were like, yeah, we would rather just re-engineer this whole front end than have to rewrite all of that stuff and try to say that the lift capacity of this one's less or more or whatever. So that's my guess. I don't actually know what happened. But before I go anywhere else, let me talk about why we do not have a tilt cylinder yet for this tractor. Now, this tractor is unique in the current subcompact world where we only have one cylinder up here, and I have no problem with that, but it has hindered my ability to make a cylinder for this based on where these flanges are. Now, all of the cylinders that we have on most of these smaller tractors, they're made in this same way. You've got a cross tube, we call this a cross tube connect, and this can be called a tang, even though this one's round. A lot of times they will be narrower. But basically you have a tang and then a cross tube. Now some will have cross tube here that's very similar looking to this, but it's all works the same way. Ultimately, the barrel, which is the working part of the cylinder, is connected to the tang or whatever connection back here, and the back of that barrel is right here. That determines, from here to here, determines what the stroke of this cylinder is. And sometimes we can have strokes that are not exactly right, but you will give up certain things if you don't make them the same. Now, we do have these locks here that keep it from dumping too far forward, so it doesn't matter how much stroke we give it, it's going to stop there. Now, when it curls back, it's going to stop here at some point. My objective is not to give you more or less necessarily. It is really to give you what you have. It's like an insurance company, you know, their guarantee for your car insurance is you can have what you had or better, not worse. So I kind of do the same thing. What you have or better, meaning you can curl back just the same amount, you can dump the same amount, and possibly you can dump more or possibly you can curl back more, but it's never less than those two. That is the objective. If it ever is the case that we have to do that, I'll be very clear about that, but I'm trying to avoid that with this tractor just like I would any of the others. And which means if we have this working part here and we want to make this bigger, we're going to have to keep this narrow so it goes into this flange, but this bigger part has to be outside the flange here. Well, in this case it's not, which means we'll have to move it forward. Any that we move it forward, we have to recover on this side. No problem, right? We've got maybe 1/4 of an inch we need to move forward. Looks like we could recover 1/4 of an inch. What's the big deal? The big deal is this flange here, now I realize this one's welded, this one is still stock, so it's basically the same. This flange here can interfere with this side. And because of that, we might be able to get some of this depending on how much bigger we go and what the interior of this is. But because of this, we can't necessarily recapture this space that we're moving forward here because of the interference here. Now on this, the reason I put the tractors next to each other to begin with is the fact that this flange is made differently than the one on the pin-on bucket. And I do believe that that flange is going to be more forgiving, which means there's a possibility, and we're going to work our way around this some way. There's a possibility if we do this, it will only fully work on the 23S. Anybody that has a pin-on bucket may only be able to get a certain amount of curl back because of the interference. Now, how do I plan on solving this? There's a few different ways. Generally, you don't want to come out of this, your mount here, you want it to be directly behind your barrel. It's not impossible that it could be adjacent to the barrel. There'll be some engineering challenges with that, but it's a possibility. The other possibility would be to relocate this in a way that doesn't require welding. So basically bolt on here and put our pin connection somewhere else on the bucket. It's a possibility, not saying that that's going to be it or not. The last one, which could be more expensive but is still a possibility, especially for people, all the people that have a BX that's not a 23S or a 25D that already has a skid steer quick connect, is if I make my own skid steer quick connect with the cylinder that goes together, I could solve for the flange challenge that we have, and you know, we could move this out, move the things appropriately, and you would have to upgrade to the skid steer quick connect, but that's going to cost more, and so that's not ideal either. It's not that I won't put that out as a possibility, as an overall solution. You'll hear me say, when I call these things they are products, but often I'll say they're solutions because they're not just one widget a lot of times. Like the turbo is, you know, a turbo kit, but it's really a power solution. You have to have all of it in order to get the power, and I'm not just selling the hose or the turbo or the exhaust. So anyhow, that is something that could come to this tractor. I don't know if there's a lot of appetite for somebody to have to buy both this cylinder, which is larger, as well as a skid steer quick connect, as well as, because of the skid steer quick connect, if you put it on here, you got to have a bucket that is skid steer quick connect. So, you know, am I going to start selling buckets? I don't know, but probably not. I'm just going to say, would there be a conversion kit that realistically could take this pin-on bucket and make it into a skid steer quick connect? Possibly. But what is that going to entail? How far forward is it going to put it? How much is that going to rob from your lifting capacity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So there's lots of there's possibilities. I'm just going to say lots of possibilities of how we'll solve for this. More likely, I think, than anything, is going to be some new bracket here that helps me relocate this in a way that not only we can get more power, but you can actually change the amount of power you can get by moving this up and down. I don't know, I haven't thought about it enough to know which way would be the way that you could get more power, but you're effectively getting more leverage, and it will change the speed. But the whole point of increasing this is to get more power. So maybe it's a combination of not so much, you know, not double the size of this. So, well, we didn't double. On this, we go from 1.5 to 1.75. So if we assume that this is a 3-inch because it's two 1.5s, then what do we get a quarter on each side. So we go from a 3 to a 3.5. Maybe we can go to 3 1/4, change the geometry a bit, and still achieve what we're trying to get, which is enough curl back to complement about how much we can actually lift now. So that's a lot of stuff to think about. It's a lot of stuff that I think about every day. I can't wait to get to this. This isn't on the top of my priority list, but it is pretty high on the priority list overall. So I do expect to get to it fairly soon. Last thing I'll mention, on this same tractor, I do have my 3D model and all of my pieces to increase the flow of this tractor by building a new hydraulic pump for it. That is the second reason. I think I mentioned that there's two reasons. One reason are these mechanical interferences that are creating a challenge. It's going to take longer to figure out how to solve for it. The second reason is, and I don't want to get into it on this video, but I should probably come back and talk about the differences in the serial and the parallel loader valves. That this tractor has a serial valve, but almost every other brand, construction equipment, everything else has a parallel valve. There are some nuances to that, but ultimately we need more flow. If we're going to make more hydraulic area available or volume available, we need more flow. And that's something we're working on this year as well, and expect it before the end of I'm not going to say a month at this point, but it's fairly high on the priority list, especially for things we're doing for Kubota. All right, well, that is it for this one. Hope that's helpful to not only give you some information about this loader, the differences between the 344 and the 340, which are found on the 2380 and the 23S, and also, of course, why it is you don't yet have a tilt cylinder. It is coming, I promise. I just don't know exactly how we're going to solve for it. When I find that out, I will share it with you. We'll have to do some prototyping, and then we'll get it out for you all to use. But if you have questions, comments, leave them below, and thanks for watching.